Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communications will come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to receive testimony regarding the Department of Homeland Security's detection and surveillance programs to address the bioterrorism threat. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. The Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communication has a long history of oversight on the issue of bioterrorism. So far this Congress, we have held multiple hearings and a classified briefing on this threat. The threat is real. We know terrorist groups like ISIS have an interest in utilizing biological agents in their attacks. In fact, a little over a year ago, a laptop reportedly retrieved from an ISIS hideout in Syria contained plans for weaponizing bubonic plague and a document discussing the advantages of using biological weapons. And we now know ISIS is intent on conducting attacks in the United States. In his 2016 Worldwide Threat Assessment provided earlier this week, the Director of National Intelligence noted that weapons of mass destruction continue to be a major threat to U.S. security. He remarked that biological materials and technologies, as well as personnel with the expertise to design and use them, move easily in the economy. The DNI also stated that infectious diseases continue to threaten our security and that a more crowded and interconnected world is increasing the opportunities for humans and animal diseases to emerge and spread globally, something we're seeing right now with the Zika virus. A bio attack could cause illness or death in hundreds of thousands of people, overwhelm our public health capabilities, and have an economic impact of over $1 trillion per incident. Our nation's capacity to mitigate the impacts of all types of biological events is a top national security priority. But we know that our efforts leave room for improvement. The Blue Ribbon Study Panel on Biodefense's report, which was released October 2015, highlights shortcomings of the Department of Homeland Security's biological surveillance and detection efforts through the National Biosurveillance Integration System, or NBIS, and the Biowatch program. In testimony before the full committee, Blue Ribbon co-chair and former Secretary of Homeland Security Tom Ridge stated, quote, DHS has made only limited progress with Biowatch and the National Biosurveillance Integration System, ... and at great expense. Limited information sharing, sorry, I closed the quote there. Limited information sharing from federal NBIS partners has hampered the effectiveness of the National Biosurveillance Integration Center, or NBIC. And Biowatch uses aging equipment, despite the fact that other agencies have fielded more advanced detection technology. He recommended that, quote, either we make these effective tools or we replace them, end quote. The GAO also completed reviews of NBIC and Biowatch, containing a number of similar findings to the Blue Ribbon Study Panel. With respect to Biowatch, the review found that DHS did not conduct sufficient testing to determine that the technology can effectively meet the program's objectives. Which brings us to today's hearing. In light of the threats that we face, the Department of Homeland Security must have biological detection and surveillance programs in place which serve to enhance our security and provide a return on our investment. I'm interested in hearing from Dr. Brinsfield on how the Office of Health Affairs, or OHA, is working to address the findings of these reviews and chart an effective course for these programs. I'm also interested in learning more about collaborative efforts between OHA and the Science and Technology Directorate to determine the next steps for Biowatch. With that in mind, the ranking member and I had a discussion with industry representatives on this very topic yesterday. We were concerned to hear that there's been limited engagement with the innovators who may have interim and long-term solutions to these problems. If you don't communicate your plans with industry, they can't plan for how they might be able to support you. These are complex problems for sure, and we must work collaboratively at all levels of government and with the private sector to address them. And with that, I welcome our witnesses, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Thompson, for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And let me say at the beginning that Ranking Member Payne is actually in the House Physician's office, and I'm kind of pinch hitting for him today. Nonetheless, welcome to our witnesses for this hearing. I'd like to also thank you for holding this hearing. The Department of Homeland Security's signature programs in this mission space, Biowatch, and the National Biosurveillance Integration Center, referred to commonly as NBIC, has historically struggled to meet Congress's expectations. This committee has conducted exhaustive oversight of the Biowatch program since it was transferred to the department and NBIC since it was authorized with the 9/11 Act. Let me mention, and I appreciate both Mr. Payne and Ms. McSally's efforts to continue those efforts. That said, I've grown frustrated, like many, that we seem to be having the same hearings over and over again. At least once every Congress, we ask the department to come to the committee to respond to the latest criticisms of Biowatch and NBIC. In 2012, we asked about reports of false positives with the currently deployed Biowatch system, a 2011 National Academy of Sciences report that found that current Biowatch technology would work in very limited circumstances and acquisition challenges that ultimately proved to be Gen 3's demise. At the time, we were assured that the currently deployed Biowatch system did work and that the Office of Health Affairs would work closely with the Science and Technology Directorate to identify new technologies to address shortcomings of the archaic Biowatch system. 2 years after the Gen 3 acquisition was officially canceled, it is unclear whether we've made any concrete progress to identify new biodetection technology. Worst yet, last fall, both the Blue Ribbon Study Panel on Biodefense and the Government Accountability Office released reports raising questions about what benefits the current Biowatch program provides. The questions raised by the study panel and GAO were many of the same questions raised by our members and the National Academy of Science years ago. Similarly, the GAO has raised questions about the value of NBIC since 2009. While I commend the Office of Health Affairs for fully implementing the recommendations GAO made to improve the NBIC, it still appears that NBIC struggles to effectively collect, integrate, and analyze biosurveillance data from across the federal government to identify emerging threats. Despite laudable efforts, GAO reports NBIC struggles to get access to the information it needs to do the job, and some stakeholders say the products NBIC produces are not timely or useful. The Blue Ribbon panel echoed these concerns, particularly regarding stalled progress on identifying innovative data sources. These are many of the problems we heard about in 2009. And so, Madam Chair, in the interest of time, I think they get the point. And we'd like to hear from our witnesses to help us out with this, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. The gentleman yields back. Other members of the subcommittee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We're pleased to have a very distinguished panel before us today on this important topic. Dr. Kathy Brinsfield serves as Assistant Secretary of Health Affairs and Chief Medical Officer for the Department of Homeland Security and leads the DHS Office of Health Affairs. Dr. Brinsfield is responsible for ensuring the DHS workforce and the nation are prepared for the health impacts of all threats, including biological and chemical terrorism and emerging infectious diseases. Prior to her appointment as Assistant Secretary and Chief Medical Officer, she served on a detail to the National Security Staff as the Director of Medical Preparedness Policy. Before joining DHS, Dr. Brinsfield worked for various organizations, including Boston EMS, Boston Metropolitan Medical Response System, and the Del Valle, I think I said that right? Did I say that right? Emergency Preparedness Training Institute. Dr. Reggie Brothers serves as Undersecretary for Science and Technology at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Dr. Brothers is responsible for science and technology portfolio that includes basic and applied research, development, demonstration, testing, and evaluation. Prior to DHS, Dr. Brothers served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research at the Department of Defense, where he was responsible for policy and oversight of the department's science and technology programs, from basic research through advanced technology development. Chris Curry is the director of GAO's Homeland Security and Justice Team, where he leads the agency's work on emergency management and national preparedness issues. In this role, he and his team of GAO auditors evaluate federal efforts and programs to prevent, plan for, and respond to natural and man-made disasters. Prior to this, Mr. Curry was acting director in the GAO's Defense Capabilities and Management Team, where he led reviews of DoD programs, including those related to military housing, aircraft, and the U.S. counter-piracy efforts. In the decade since DHS was created, Mr. Curry has led numerous audits and assessments of DHS programs, including those related to transportation security, research and development of new technologies, and the department's effort to test and evaluate large acquisition programs and technologies. The witnesses' full written statements will appear in the record, and the chair now recognizes Dr. Brinsfield for 5 minutes.
Chairman McSally, Mr. Thompson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today alongside my colleague, Dr. Brothers, and Mr. Curry from the Government Accountability Office. Thank you for your continued oversight on this issue and your commitment to strengthening our nation's biodefense. I know you are familiar with the Office of Health Affairs and our mission and role in biodetection and biosurveillance, so I'll focus my remarks on what we're doing to build better systems to detect and respond to biological events, whether man-made or naturally occurring. We worry about biological attacks and other major biological incidents because of how wide-reaching the impacts can be. Within 24 hours, an individual infected with a virulent contagious pathogen introduced naturally or intentionally could land on our shores and spark an outbreak with far-reaching national or global consequences. As noted by the Blue Ribbon Study Panel on Biodefense, our ability to defend the American public is a whole-of-government issue because no single government agency or even level of government has the resources and the mission to handle this alone. I continue to believe that this country must have a layered early warning capability for biodefense. Right now, our Biowatch program and National Biosurveillance Integration Center, or NBIC, serve to fill that need. These capabilities aim to provide us with information that help decision makers track trends and detect anomalies that may indicate that an attack has occurred before sick people start flooding our hospitals and clinics. Biowatch has worked over the last 7 years to reinforce the performance and capabilities of currently deployed technologies. The deployed technology has been tested many times and further verified through the Quality Assurance Program. The early warning capabilities that Biowatch provides allow responders and communities to make timely decisions and take actions to protect the American people and save lives. Can our capabilities go further? Yes. We acknowledge that even our current Biowatch technology is labor-intensive and not suitable for every environment in which we need to detect an attack. The department also appreciates the work of the GAO on Biowatch. GAO clearly recognizes some of the unique challenges for this system, which was rolled out with the best available technology in 2003 to respond to an urgent threat. So in recognition of these challenges, we are looking at a suite of capabilities that will expand the venues into which Biowatch collectors can be deployed and provide more rapid detection, better situational awareness, and improve our collective decision-making in response to a bioterror attack. Dr. Brothers and I share this goal because it is important. Together, including our interagency partners such as Department of Defense, we are assessing various technologies to integrate into the Biowatch system. In cooperation with DHS Science and Technology, we are exploring advanced detection technologies, such as improved DNA sequencing techniques intended to improve sensitivity and expand the range of agents of concern that Biowatch is able to detect. The department has a plan and proposed timeline to implement the recommendations of the most recent report, and much of that effort is currently underway or already complete. The same goes for biosurveillance. As part of our layered defense, the NBIC is the nation's integrator of human health, animal health, and environmental data to develop a comprehensive understanding of the biological threat landscape and emerging incidents to ensure our nation's decision makers have timely, accurate, and actionable information. This includes terrorist incidents and naturally occurring biological threats. For example, since April 2015, NBIC has provided updates to federal, state, and local officials on the evolving nature of the current Zika virus outbreak. We are cognizant the reports by GAO and the Blue Ribbon Panel have acknowledged that although NBIC has made progress in delivering daily situational awareness to our partners, we still have work to do to fully realize the vision of a comprehensive biosurveillance integration. NBIC will continue to advance its capacity to conduct biosurveillance reporting and analysis by developing new collaboration tools, pursuing innovative data sources and methods, and fostering greater stakeholder engagement. One such example is our work with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and Defense for data sharing and integration, which we hope to leverage as a model for future interagency collaborations. I wish it was quick, easy, and cheap to improve our biosurveillance and biodetection capabilities. Unfortunately, it isn't. It's a constant balance to improve our capabilities in a fiscally responsible way. At present, our programs provide and will continue to provide meaningful and actionable protections for the security of our homeland. A key part of our system is our engagement with state and local partners. In addition to our biodetection and early warning support, we continue to seek ways to support our first responder communities in their preparation and response to biological events. By developing initiatives like the Voluntary First Responder Anthrax Vaccine Program, for which I thank this committee for its support, we improve our national preparedness. We appreciate the legislative attention this committee has given to these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brinsfield. The chair now recognizes Dr. Brothers for 5 minutes.
Chairman McSally, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, good afternoon. Oops.
Thank you.
That's better. Let me try that again. Chairman McSally, Ranking Member Thompson, distinguished members of the subcommittee, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to discuss the role of the Department of Homeland Security and Science Technology Directorate in our nation's biodefense. I'm grateful for the committee's longstanding interest in and support for the department and directorate. As the Blue Ribbon Study Panel on Biodefense's National Blueprint for Biodefense recently made clear, the risk of man-made and naturally occurring biological events has not waned in the 15 years since the Amerithrax attacks. In that time, the department has played a pivotal role in characterizing the biological threat, providing warning of emerging threats, and coordinating government response during events. Still, though appreciative of progress made, the blueprint also emphasizes opportunities for improving and streamlining the federal approach to biodefense. As with input from our colleagues in GIO, we welcome those recommendations and look forward to discussing them in further detail today. The mission of the Science and Technology Directorate, or S&T, is to deliver effective and innovative insight, methods, and solutions for the critical needs of the Homeland Security enterprise. As the research and development arm and technical center of gravity for the department, S&T's portfolio extends across diverse Homeland Security mission areas, a few of which include borders and maritime, cyber, transportation, first responders, disaster resilience, and of course, biodefense. We work hand in hand with our operators and end users to identify capability gaps, connect them with the right innovators and solutions from laboratories, small and large businesses, universities, and international partners. Last year, as part of the Unity of Effort initiative, the Secretary directed S&T to launch Departmental Integrated Product Teams, or IPTs. These represent a formal mechanism for identifying technology capability gaps across the department's mission areas. In the past 6 months, S&T and its operational partners have stood 5 of these teams. Together, they have validated ongoing research and development activities and prioritized project topics in IPT mission areas. The ultimate result of the IPT process will be improved coordination of DHS research and development and assurance that identified technology solutions address component mission needs. The Biological Threat IPT was one of 5 specifically called for by the Secretary and tasked with identifying priority capability gaps in biodefense, as well as research and development efforts to address those gaps. One of S&T's most important partners in this area is Dr. Brinsfield in the Office of Health Affairs. Our current collaboration is on an enhancement effort for Biowatch. It will spur both near and long-term development and delivery of technology improvements to the essential Biowatch and National Biosurveillance Integration Center programs. Another important aspect worthy of recognition is demand for collaboration and cooperation in biodefense work. Unlike many challenges the federal government faces that tend to isolate with a specific lead agency, biodefense is almost uniquely interagency and intergovernmental and involves, in addition to state and local public health workers, the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, and Justice. Although agencies have specific equities, holistic success against biological threats requires a cooperative, collaborative environment. Biodefense research and development, by its nature, also serves a broad group of stakeholders. In addition to co-managing a laboratory, S&T works with the USDA on programs dedicated to the protection of livestock from foreign animal diseases. In partnership with the intelligence community, we support acquisition of medical countermeasures by the Department of Health and Human Services as required by the BioShield Act of 2004. We partner with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on bioassay and diagnostic development for the detection and rapid identification of bioagents during a biological attack. We jointly run biological forensics programs with the FBI that enable surveillance, investigation, and prosecution of criminal elements seeking to harm citizens. We work with several major city-level transit authorities and the EPA on remediation technology for public transportation systems in the event of a large-scale biological attack. Homeland Security in this area involves much more than DHS, and successful research and development is determined by how well we work with the entire community. DHS cannot and should not do this alone. Protecting our nation from biological attack is a joint effort. We're working across government with partners like DoD to share information, build upon successes and lessons learned, and leverage resources whenever possible. Although civilian and military missions are distinct, information gained and investment made in each informs and improves the other. This rich union of effort, regardless of agency or level of government, allows all mission owners to do their part to protect citizens from biological threats. That's where S&T is focused in all of our research and development projects in this area. Thank you for your time today, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Brothers. The chair now recognizes Mr. Curry for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman McSally and Ranking Member Thompson. It's an honor to be here. Today, I'd like to discuss GEO's work on some of DHS's most critical biosurveillance programs. For almost a decade, we have evaluated DHS's efforts to implement Biowatch and the National Biosurveillance Integration Center, or NBIC. Regarding Biowatch, this committee is well aware of the DHS acquisition challenges in implementing the next-gen, or Gen 3 system, and the decision to cancel the program in 2014. However, without Gen 3 to replace it, new questions were raised about how well the current system works. Our report last October found that 12 years after the system was first deployed, DHS does not have reliable information about its capabilities, mainly because it was put in the field so quickly without performance requirements. We also found that because the capabilities of the system were not fully tested, its uncertainties and limitations are not fully known. Now, some may ask why this is important now, since Gen 3 was canceled and the system has been in place for over a decade. It's important because right now DHS is considering improvements based on unknown capabilities of the aging system. The next logical question is, what do we do about it now? So we made a number of recommendations that we think are critical to any investments in the existing or future system. First, we recommended that DHS not pursue upgrades to the system until it establishes performance requirements and tests against those requirements. Two, we recommended that they fully account for any uncertainties and limitations in the system. And last, that they incorporate best practices in any future developmental testing or upgrades to the existing or new system. So let me now switch to NBIC. Since our 2009 report, the folks at NBIC have implemented all of our recommendations for strengthening collaboration and overcoming various challenges. For example, they developed new products to communicate disease outbreaks to their federal biosurveillance partners, like CDC and the Agriculture Department. However, late last year, we reported that persistent challenges still get in the way of it fully meeting the mission that you all set out for it. For example, most of the primary federal partners told us that NBIC's products and activities did not always add value, did not provide new meaning, or did not help them identify biological events quicker. We also found that NBIC has difficulty getting the data it needs because partners won't share it or there are restrictions to sharing it. These challenges are not easy to address, particularly by DHS or NBIC alone. We identified options for policy or structural changes to help NBIC better fulfill its mission. These options ranged all the way from repealing NBIC's statute all the way to providing NBIC with additional authority to better fulfill its mission. Each option has benefits and limitations and funding implications, and they're not easy. For example, granting NBIC access to more data could help them conduct additional analysis, but may not identify emerging threats earlier than they or other agencies can do now. And I want to wrap up by making a few broader points and connections. Biowatch and NBIC are critical programs. However, they're only pieces of a larger biosurveillance enterprise, as Dr. Brothers mentioned. As we and others like the Blue Ribbon Panel have pointed out, investments in these programs should be evaluated in terms of cost and benefit and compared to other programs across the government as part of a national strategic plan. Also critical is using the most recent threat information to guide decision-making about these investments. For example, Biowatch is intended to detect a large airborne bioattack. This threat must be weighed against other threats we now face, such as natural disease outbreaks like Zika and Ebola. Last, as you know, DHS is planning to merge OHA, pieces of S&T, with other parts of DHS into a new ChemBio RadNuke office. So this will also impact these programs and DHS's role moving forward. This completes my statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for initial questions. So I want to start with Biowatch. And again, I appreciate your testimony and all the work that's been done by all of the witnesses. We can all agree we need to make improvements, I think, to our current detection system, that we rolled out Biowatch in a hurry, and so that comes with limitations. And obviously, as we look back now 12 years later, the limitations are real as far as the archaic nature. Dr. Brinsfield, you mentioned the manpower intensivity of it, maybe lack of nimbleness. And certainly, I think we can all agree we probably want something that's more newer technology, that's a little bit more responsive. And with 2 years past since Gen 3 was canceled, where are we at? What's been going on in the last 2 years, and what's the plan for us to be able to see? Are you trying to fix Gen 2 and upgrade Gen 2? Are you looking at requirements for a follow-on system that's Gen 4 that is maybe a long-term project, and then in the meantime, maybe bridging the gaps with some off-the-shelf stuff during spiral development? I mean, these are some of the things that we talked about with industry partners yesterday, but I mean, what's the bottom line? Where are we at, and what can we expect in what timeline for the improvement of the system? Dr. Brinsfield?
So I think if I can, I'll answer that in 2 ways, yes and yes. We're looking both at improvements to the current system with our partners at S&T. I'm happy to say that the Biowatch program has reached out to its stakeholder communities, the interagency, multiple cities, sat down and asked them on a few occasions, what's most important to you? What do you need to see improved for the current Biowatch system to really be more useful and to have greater, ability to affect your decision making? To that end, a number of requirements were generated that have been passed and worked on with S&T, and I'll let Dr. Brothers address that. And then on a second point, we've also been working with the S&T on the new IPT process and have identified timeliness of environmental detection and how we improve that as a longer-term goal.
Sure. So I think what we've done is we've looked at the improvements in terms of two different timeframes. We've got a near-term timeframe, 1 to 3 years, and a longer-term timeframe, 3 to 8 years or so. If you look at the kind of the chain of the way Biowatch works, from collection, et cetera, to the eventual laboratory analysis, we've broken that down into these different areas, and we've looked at that and said, what kind of improvements can we do? Now, I agree with Mr. Curry. We have to have the right kind of requirements before we can do the right job to actually figure out specifically what we want. But as you know, technology is changing rapidly, right? This whole idea of data analytics, predictive analytics, different ways of understanding threats, different type of bioassays, et cetera, has advanced tremendously. Therefore, what we need to do, even as we're trying to generate these kind of requirements that we're talking about, we have to understand what the art of the possible is. In the pursuit of that art of the possible, we're reaching out to industry. We fully realize that we don't have all the answers internally. The answer is with this incredibly creative S&T ecosystem, right? This is the industry, laboratories, academia, et cetera. We're fully cognizant of that. And as such, we're reaching out with broad area announcements, requests for information, et cetera, to understand what that art of the possible is. Once we understand that, that's when we start taking that along with the kind of requirements that we're getting, working with OHA, to start understanding in this architecture we're talking about, this layered architecture that Dr. Brinsfield mentioned, what are the right things we actually put in play? So some near-term things we're looking at in terms of just improving the equipment that we have, and then there's some stuff we're looking at working with industry to actually make a much better system.
So timeline-wise for any of this, can we, I don't want to be holding my breath, so are we expecting requests to us? Is there something you need from Congress or a report back to Congress in the next single-digit months? Or are we talking double-digit months or single-digit years on here's the plan for the follow-on for Biowatch?
So I think for the incremental improvements, I'll speak to that. We're looking at a timeline that would hopefully have us coming back to start being able to do the acquisition process and acquire some of those improvements in the next planned fiscal year, so by FY18.
Okay, great. Now, when we met with just a handful, it wasn't the whole industry, obviously, yesterday, and they had shared, and I want to make sure that I got this right, they had received some RFIs, and they gave feedback. That was about 2 years ago, right? About 2 years ago, and then they were like, well, what did you do with the information we gave back to you? And so I think they explained that they really felt like there was some off-the-shelf technology, because technology is developing so rapidly, that could be deployed in the interim, the perfect being the enemy of the good, being our constant challenge here, where we're chasing a perfect solution but taking too long and then having an inadequate solution for a long period of time. Is there something that could be deployed more rapidly from your assessment off the shelf in order to either augment Biowatch or start to replace it as we continue to move towards that longer term solution? Either Dr. Brothers or Dr. Brinsfield.
So like I said, right now we're trying to determine that. I mean, I think there's a lot of technologies out there, and we've got expertise in-house that understands some of those technologies, but I think it's a mistake for us to choose what that is without getting a good survey of the landscape. And so that's what we're doing right now. So we have 4 to 6 RFIs that are either out or going out shortly, and so the industry folks should be seeing those.
Got it. So FY18, Dr. Brinsfield, so you're basically saying for the next year and a half, we can expect DHS to stay with the status quo, or?
So for the next year and a half, we can expect to be able to do maybe, working with our partners, these kind of incremental improvements, but for the acquisition process to truly build through, make sure we do it correctly, follow MD 102 and all the guidelines, that's about the time to build all the pieces through to meet that guideline process.
Okay.
I think one of the other challenges, if I can just sort of go to it, has been whether or not these systems can be deployed in an indoor environment. Clearly, that was identified strongly by the stakeholders as something that they want to be able to do, and that sets a different set of problems for them. They want to be able to make decisions on whether to evacuate, different kinds of decisions than you make on whether or not you're going to treat a large population. To that end, some of these RFIs are actually looking at how we take existing technologies, pair them together in a way that they can work on top of the current Biowatch detection system for that type of deployment. So I do think that what we're going to see here, even though there are incremental improvements of off-the-shelf technologies, will be significant improvements in the usability of the Biowatch system.
Great. One last question, and then I'll hand it over to the ranking member here on BioShield. Is the Blue Ribbon Study Panel related the need to implement better military-civilian collaboration. Dr. Brothers, you came from the DoD, so can you speak to any sort of collaboration that you're doing with DoD?
Absolutely. Right now we're working with the DoD's JPO, Chemical Biological Defense. That's in under ATNL. And we're working with them. We've signed an MOU with them. We just spoke with them. Actually, I just spoke with them. It was a couple weeks ago. They have a program called Jupiter. And the program Jupiter is really about biodefense, biosurveillance. They're developing a number of different types of technologies that we're collaborating on the development of. So I think that we have a very close relationship. Outside of that MOU, we also have a relationship in a group called the Capabilities Development Working Group, CDWG. That's chaired by myself and the Undersecretary ATNL, where we meet to discuss a variety of issues. This is one of the issues we discuss. We also have collaboration through the Mission Executive Council. So there's a number of forums, as well as through the Committee on Homeland National Security as well. So there's a number of different forums where we are co-chairing committees and subcommittees, where we have the opportunity to collaborate across the agencies.
Okay, great, thank you. I want to now recognize Ranking Member Thompson for questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In my opening statements, I kind of dated myself on this issue that, we've been here before. And to be honest, I want to make sure that I'm just not hearing another hearing for another Congress saying the same thing. So convince me that we have changed the technology. Convince me that we have acquired better equipment and that we are getting to where Mr. Curry said we ought to be. Dr. Brinsfield, can you help me out with that?
So, sir, if I can use an example, in your opening statement, you referred to what's been known as false positives. And I think in the past history of Biowatch, there were times when there were detections that were perhaps true detections of what the system was looking for, but weren't useful for public health or law enforcement agencies. Since then, the program has done much to improve its assays, change the way it does those, done quality assurance, so that we don't actually have those false detections anymore. As a matter of fact, instead what we have is a number of detections of low-level environmental agent that have shown to actually be related to human disease. And this uptick in the disease Francisca tularensis happened in this past summer, so that we have actually had the system truly detect an environmental uptick in disease where there were limited number of people who became ill, and that those detections were worked with both the CDC, FBI, and other partners. Now, it's not a detection of a terror attack, and that, is a good thing. And surely no detection of a biological agent will ever determine alone if that release was naturally occurring or intentional from a terror attack. That's what our partnership with law enforcement and the FBI is intended to do. But it does show that the system has progressed in its ability to detect and has actually had true detections in this area.
So, Mr. Curry, do you agree to that?
Well, sir, I think I have many of the same questions Chairman McSally had about what's actually happening right now. And I think there's two different issues. You have the system that's in place in over 30 cities, and it's been in place for over a decade now. And we have found there are limitations with that system, and the testing has not been fully completed, and they did not set performance requirements. Our concern, though, is that when they talk about some of these improvements, that information and that system is being used as the baseline for those improvements. So that's one issue. The second issue is on the next generation of technology, which is in the R&D realm. And this could be things that don't even look like Biowatch looked. So there's very little detail about what exactly the next step is, because you mentioned, has the technology gotten better? What is the next step? We're using the same technology we've been using, and it's not clear what the next technology is going to look like at this point.
Dr. Brothers, can you help us out on this?
Sure. I think that we're looking at looking forward, so Mr. Curry, you were saying, what's kind of next. We're looking forward, and that's is what Dr. Brinsfield is talking about, which is a fully layered approach. The fully layered approach involves integration of biosurveillance, the type of thing the NBIC does, along with advanced biodetection. There are a number of technologies that are out there that they may be agent agnostic. Maybe you're looking at next generation sequencing or something like that. Maybe looking at some type of advanced mass spectrometry. There's a number of technologies that are out there that people are talking about that could be useful in these type of architectures. I think we're simultaneously looking at what these advanced architectures could be. I'm not going to say that we're going to give you an exact architecture right now, but we know what we have to find, right? It has to be this rapid response network, and we're actually looking at advanced IT infrastructures to enable this advanced infrastructure. The point is, we need to understand what's out there, and that's what we're doing right now. We do have an existing system that's providing important properties, and we're trying to improve that.
And I understand that. But we're on the same horse, and we need, and I'm being a little, not crash, but I think we need to get to the next level of technology because we're still using that same equipment. And I'm not certain if we can, I understand the layered part, but we still have the same equipment. So how are we going to change this now?
So from S&T's perspective, we're making sure we understand not just technology, but we also do a good job of characterizing potential threats, right? So that's what we do through our NBAC and through the BITRA and these kinds of things. So we understand the science of the agents or the pathogens. We also understand the technologies. Then in terms of the requirements, that's what we're turning to our partners in OHA to understand what we should be building for the next generation system.
Okay, I'm going to go at another route, Madam Chair. Now, I'm told that what we're doing is based on incidents where there's 10,000 or more. Are we doing anything incidents less than 10,000?
So it certainly raises a good question. As the program was initially rolled out, it was intended to detect incidents of 10,000 or more. As we look at our state and local partners and what they are asking us for, they're asking for indoor venues and different levels of population affected than the system has initially been. Certainly, the changing nature of the terrorist threat and what we need to plan for is a significant piece of what we're going to be looking at as we roll out future requirements. And to that end, we really want to make sure we continue to partner with them and hear from them where they're interested in. They're interested in subway systems. They're interested in sports venues. They're interested in a whole host of things, which will set up ways to detect much less than potentially 10,000 people.
Well, Madam Chair, since I'm the elder in the group, you know, we've heard this before, and I'm trying to get us down the road. And so my angst in this is, when can we expect the next rollout? You don't have to tell us what it looks like, but we just need to have some idea that we are not still working with 12, 15-year-old situation when things have changed.
So I can only speak to the near-term rollout and those improvements on the product, as you mentioned. And those ones, as we said, we're working through an acquisition process that we hope to build into the budget that will provide the improvements. As opposed, when you speak of the next stage, that's really our R&D problem.
Well, R&D?
So I can't give you a time frame. I mean, all right, this is an exploratory process right now. And I think we're working with OHA on the near term, but in terms of a next generation system, like I said, we've set timeframes for 3 to 8 years for the longer term improvements. I'm unable to give you greater fidelity than that.
But you do understand the concern
Absolutely understand the
of
concern.
Congress in this issue.
Absolutely understand it and share your concern. Absolutely.
Mr. Curry, can you provide some guidance on this?
Well, I'll try. One of my concerns about, so as I said again, there's two issues here. There's the long-term R&D issue,
Right.
which it's not really clear exactly what that looks like, and that's probably natural to R&D. But then there's the improvements that the administration is talking about. My concern about the improvements is the improvements are based on the existing technology as far as I understand it. We had some concerns about the testing and the way the existing technology was rolled out and the uncertainties in the system. They've done some testing. I'm not saying that's bad. It just hasn't been a comprehensive set of tests to tell you whether it does what it's supposed to do. So if they're going to take the current system and they're going to incrementally improve it, then that has implications for that, and that concerns us. And I think that gets back to our recommendations. It may seem like we're asking folks to go back in time to set requirements and do the testing for a system that's almost 12 years old. However, if you're going to use the current system to improve, then it makes sense to do that.
Absolutely. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes my subcommittee ranking member, Mr. Payne, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and ranking member. To follow the ranking member's angst, the technology, well, rolled out as next gen, I guess, is 12 to 15 years old. The actual technology is 50 years old, correct?
You're referring to the laboratory component of the technology, the testing, yes.
Yeah. I'm just a member of Congress in my second term, and, no stretch of the imagination, the experts that you are, but you would have think that would have been able to move the marker in some manner over 50-year-old technology. I mean, my watch is going to be obsolete next month, you know, and I bought it a year ago. And does the Department of Defense use any of these type of equipment or something to watch for issues around this?
So, actually, the Department of Defense uses Biowatch collectors at some of its sites. If we're talking about the technology that is the polymerase chain reaction, which is the current technology they're using to validate the organism, that is one of the questions we'll be asking in the RFI to see if anybody has a better technology, as you mentioned, sequencing. But we've also looked in the past with the National Academy of Sciences at other possible technologies that could be used in this area, none of which had a readiness level that were ready to be deployed yet. Certainly, as you know, the biological sciences improve, and they are vastly improving, our ability to do things such as sequencing may come and be fast enough and readily available enough that it's something we could actually deploy throughout the country in the labs, and that's, you know, the part of the reasoning for the RFI. That's what we're hoping to find.
Mr. Curry, would GAO know of types of equipment that the Department of Defense is using that could potentially be helpful to DHS?
Well, I couldn't name very specific pieces of the technology that might be able to use in the same way that Biowatch is being used. We do know from our work that DHS does coordinate with the Defense Department a lot. I will say, though, that technology development for Homeland Security purposes is very different than for defense or for the warfighter. There may be more restrictions. You have privacy restrictions. These things have to operate in public places, and I think it can be challenging to do that. However, one of the things that's why it's so important to follow the acquisition process and set requirements early on. What I mean by requirements is what do you want that technology to do, and how should it function in whatever an environment it's supposed to function. You have to set that early on, and then you have to test to those requirements, and sometimes it's not quick. You can't just take a piece of technology off the shelf and throw it out there, and that's kind of what happened at the very beginning of the program. And it's difficult, but it's a laborious process, but it's necessary to make sure it's going to be successful.
Okay. Let's see, how much I still have time?
Yeah, this clock's not ticking, so take a little more time.
Okay. Dr. Brinsfield, the GAO proposed several paths forward to improve, you know, the effectiveness of NBIC. Can you describe the process OHA is using to evaluate these proposals?
So I want to really congratulate NBIC on getting out there and reaching its stakeholder community and trying to make sure they're meeting their needs. So on a number of issues. One is they signed a memorandum of agreement with all the different departments and agencies that we work with on the federal level and set up a structure on how we will actually govern NBIC. I have a co-chair on the oversight body for NBIC. It was HHS last year, and this year it's USDA, and we hope to continue to work in that manner. Our current partnership with USDA in sharing the oversight body of NBIC has led a number of great ideas in terms of how we will change the way we use detailees and structure that process. NBIC has also looked at changing the way that it does its reports and reporting. As you know, many people here get them. I think it's important to realize we're not trying to give human health information to human health agencies. We're trying to coordinate information, and we're trying to make it available to people who maybe don't regularly get that type of information. We get great feedback from our partners in commerce, in other types of departments that don't day-to-day deal with health information. They like the new setup for the reports. They like the way they're set up so they're getting the bottom line up front and really getting the information they need to help them make decisions. In fact, when the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials went yesterday to meet with Energy and Commerce to talk about Zika, they were asked what what they could do to help the state and local public health people, and they said, we'd like better access to the NBIC reports. So, you know, those kind of feedback and comments really help us understand that we're meeting some of the outreach parameters that we need to do. Now, we know, without a doubt, that we need to do a better job at sharing data across human health, animal health, and environmental health. And to Mr. Curry's point, there are pieces here we may be able to do on our own, and pieces that are a larger government issue, and pieces which may have technology solutions that Dr. Brothers' S&T can really help us with. And we're looking forward to those types of improvements.
Mr. Curry, would you like to comment?
Sure. I agree with Dr. Brinsfield. I mean, part of what we found in our work is that the federal agencies, and we actually didn't go out and talk to state and locals too, but the federal agencies that aren't routinely involved in public health issues did find the NBIC reports useful. And I want to make it clear that, you know, we aren't saying that what NBIC produces is bad, and the folks over there have worked really hard to implement our recommendations. What we're saying is that its core mission, in addition to coordination, was to integrate biosurveillance information. And part of that is providing new meaning to the information that's out there, collecting it, analyzing it, and providing new meaning. And what we heard from the primary biosurveillance partners, these are folks like USDA, CDC, is that that information, they already have it, they already understand it, and it's not new to them, and it really doesn't provide any new meaning. So that's what we pointed out in our report. The reason we did not make specific recommendations to NBIC is because we have made many in the past, and those have been implemented to address these challenges, but the challenges still exist. So we think part of what we did was try to offer you all as the policymakers options to consider in moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Brinsfield, oh my goodness, my time is, you sure? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Brinsfield, you were probably wishing my time was up, weren't you?
I enjoy coming to visit you, Mr. Perry.
Could you give a little explanation, your funding request for 2017? It doesn't appear to be a request for new funding for NBIC to carry out, you know, the mission in response to the GAO report.
Sir, our funding for these programs has remained...
Or the authorities, I'm sorry.
Our funding for these programs, our funding request for these programs has remained level across these different years. As you know, you have graciously given NBIC extra funds in past years to do different sorts of demonstration projects to look at potential improvements, and that was greatly appreciated. But these funds remain level from prior years' requests.
So are you attempting to gain favor with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle by not asking for more funds?
I think, sir, it's a complex risk space, and we're looking at a lot of potential threats and risks. As Chairman McSally is very well aware, we're also very concerned about our responsibilities in the chem space, and we're trying to balance our many responsibilities in this area in what is really a changing nature threat.
It's understandable. Okay, well, Madam Chair, I will yield back at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I have similar questions, and I think, is Congressman Donovan coming, do you think? Okay, well, we'll just, so I do want to just wrap up a little bit on Biowatch and technology and engagement with industry. My staff reminded me that one of the RFIs you guys put out had 10,000 responses to it. So obviously industry's got a lot to share and respond to regarding these RFIs. I know DHS sometime in the near future is doing an industry day related to stuff that we're dealing with the visa program and all that kind of stuff. Have you had industry days, or are you interested in industry days, or even roundtables where, you know, where we're all sitting together instead of us meeting with industry yesterday and you today? Like, sometimes let's all just sit down together and try and figure out how we can move some things forward faster, and that includes us, whether there's new authorities or anything needed.
So I can tell you this, that one of the things that we've been trying to do, so since I've been here, since 2014, been trying to do greater outreach to industry, quite frankly. One of the areas we've been trying to do greater outreach has been into the Silicon Valley, the Bostons, the Austins, those kind of areas, to understand what new technologies there are. And so for an example of what you're talking about, we do industry days, but we're taking a somewhat of a non-traditional approach to this. Our approach has been to actually have an ideation event where we pose a problem to creative people. And then we actually do a workshop. This type of workshop is around principles developed by the Stanford University Design School. And coming out of that, then we generate a solicitation. We've also worked with the Undersecretary of Management to try to streamline our acquisition practices so that we can more quickly get investment dollars to companies. Because, as you know, many companies, unless they're used to doing business with the government, they don't have the kind of accounting system set up, and it becomes very difficult for them to deal with some of our acquisition practices. So we're trying to speed up both the pace at which we get solicitations out, speed of the pace at which we evaluate those proposals that we receive in, and speed of the pace where we actually get the investment dollars out. The point is that as fast as technology is changing, as I mentioned earlier, we need to be able to engage at that same tempo and to be able to quickly vet so we have fast failures and move on and efficiently use the taxpayers' dollars.
Great, thanks. I want to now switch over some of my questions on the MBIC. And, you know, we're always formed by our own experiences. And I have a lot of experiences in the military of being in operation centers, and the last of which was at AFRICOM. And we were hoping to be more of an interagency operations center, right? We're military authorities, but we really wanted other agencies to be there. We wanted other agencies to share information with us. And it was painful because we didn't have any authority to direct them to, and it was only as good as the information that they provided. And it seems to me it's the same exact dynamic, you know, with what we're talking about with the MBIC, which is if you're directed to be coordinating, you're basically an operations center. You're integrating information. That's what every kind of operations center does, trying to provide decision quality information to your customers, but you don't have the authority to direct other agencies to participate. You have to beg them to or ask them to volunteer and participate. They're only going to do that if it's in their best interest and under limited resources. And then the information is only good as what they're sharing with you. So it's this circular, of course it's not useful because everybody's not participating. And so you're wanting to do that role and that mission, but you're limited by, I guess, not the authority to, you know, be directing that. So are there any new authorities that are required for MBIC to be more effective and directive of other agencies? And I don't know if you can answer that, Dr. Brinsfield. You might need to answer that, Mr. Curry. I mean, is the issue authorities? Because again, I feel the pain because I know what that's like. You know, what needs to change so that and it has to be useful. We don't need to direct people to do things that are not within their interest because they have missions with limited resources as well.
Absolutely. No, I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
Great summary. I think we did talk a little bit in the report about these options and what it would take to actually execute some of these options. For example, in order to get MBIC access to certain data, there would have to probably be laws requiring sharing, or something would have to happen to require agencies to share. However, one of the reasons we didn't make specific recommendations is that wouldn't necessarily guarantee it would fix all these problems. I mean, it wouldn't just sort of fix everything right out of the bat. I think one of the interesting questions is that we asked the federal partners, though, even given what they said about MBIC, was, do you think that this idea of having somebody be a federal integrator for biosurveillance is a good idea? And they said yes. Somebody absolutely needs to serve in that role. I think the question just is, you know, who should it be? And that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, it's been, one could question whether moving this to another agency would fix the problems. Maybe they would have the same exact issues trying to get information from the other agencies too. So it's a difficult problem, but it's one that, you know, it's not going away. We've been seeing this for, you know, over half a decade now, and I think it just needs to be considered.
So of the options that you listed, Mr. Curry, in the report, which would you personally recommend?
Well, we didn't recommend anything on purpose because, you know, at GAO, we are not the policymakers, you are. So what we tried to do is just do our best to give the pros and cons of each, the limitations. The other issue is, and we didn't do an analysis on this because it's very difficult, but this has funding implications. I mean, if you're going to give additional authorities, then you probably have to give money to somebody and take it away from somebody else. So, and that's difficult and challenging to do that. So we did not come out with any one approach.
So, and it seems that, as you mentioned, some of the federal agencies that are already in this space are probably like, you know, this report is the master of the obvious, it's not new information, but those that could benefit from it are the state and local, you know, individuals that are having to deal, or the first responders, the public health officials. So can you share a little bit about did you engage with them during the?
No, we did not. We had to survey over 15 different federal departments, so it was outside of our scope to actually go and talk to the state and locals. But I mean, we did hear from the folks at NBIC about situations where they provided these reports to folks in advance of special events like, you know, Super Bowl and things like that. But
So Dr. Musa, could you just share the level of collaboration with state and local authorities?
So we like to make sure in two ways that our reports are well coordinated with the interagency. So first off, you know, if we're sharing reports on this, we're making sure that CDC, HHS has looked specifically at the information and they're comfortable that it's relevant and exactly where we are. We've also
So how long does that take? I mean, that just made my head hurt. I mean, you want timely information, but if you're coordinating amongst multiple bureaucracies, then often your information can be quite old.
And they have really done a fantastic job at speeding that process up and creating products that can give us the brief report so we can get immediate information out and then more, you know, in-depth reports later. And so, yes, we're getting information out on a regular cycle. The state and locals have numerous ways they can get these reports. They can sign up direct. They can go through the associations, state and territorial health officials, you know, city and county health officials. They also, at times during certain events, CDC has distributed the NBIC reports. And
is it just as health officials, or also to like law enforcement, first responders,
so
fire?
we work with different groups, and we have opportunities for them to sign up and get these reports as well. And some of them find them quite useful. We've also worked with the, you know, governors, the Homeland Security advisors, and some of the other, some of those other groups to make these available. As a matter of fact, there are many people here in this building who get these reports and also find them quite useful.
Okay, great. I'm assuming you were involved in the Ebola response then, that NBIC had a role to play there. You know, we in the military, we do AARs, after action reviews, and then we identify, some people call them lessons learned. I call them lessons identified because they usually are not learned unless they are implemented. So did you identify, or do you have a process to identify lessons identified, or did you do an AAR after Ebola? And how is that playing out as far as what you're doing with the Zika virus?
So there is an ongoing AAR process with Ebola, looking at some of these different issues. The information sharing piece was not identified as a deficiency. It was actually considered to be something that went fairly well, and I think we'll continue to do that. The most of it has to do with organizational structure and how information is shared. We certainly are participating on an interagency basis with Zika, and as a matter of fact, NBIC first identified and reported on an unknown Brazilian disease in March of 2015 and reported on Zika first in April of 2015, and have been coordinating closely with their HHS partners.
Okay, great. Ranking Member, do you have another round of questions?
See, this is for Dr. Brinsfield and Dr. Brothers. No, as you know, the committee recently enacted legislation that would consolidate the activities of OHA and certain chem bio activities at S&T into a new Siberni office. At this point, the chem and bio research and development activities would remain at S&T. Can you describe the current working relationship between S&T and OHA with respect to pursuing the new biodetection technologies?
Start. So currently we co-chair the Bio-IPT, this is something we're looking to continue to do in the future, and we're working with FEMA to develop those gaps, if you will, that need to be filled in the biospace.
Yeah, I think so. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we developed these IPTs as a way to consolidate capability gaps across the department. One of those IPTs is biothreat, and Dr. Brinsfield and FEMA are the co-chairs of the biothreat IPT. Through that IPT, we've already got to the point where we've identified 5 high-priority areas. These have to still be further vetted and sent to the Secretary, but we've done a quick, and I got to commend Dr. Brinsfield for just the good work on this IPT, because we've got to these capability gaps we haven't had before. These will then be used as a way to drive our research investment in those gap areas to try to close those gaps.
Okay. In light, of how those things are going, do you anticipate chem bio research and development staying at S&T or eventually moving over to the new office?
So I think there's been a lot of discussion about this, and the questions have come up of what are the best models for R&D. And I think in a number of people's estimation, that's mine as well, if you look objectively at it, a lot of the advancements in technology these days, the innovation that people talk about, come about because of convergence of ideas. So for example, MIT has an institute called the Convergence Institute. And what they do is they look at the convergence of engineering, of biology, of physics, and mathematics. And they're saying they're putting people in those different areas of disciplines in one place. And what research has shown is that when you put people of disciplines in one place, you make a critical mass of ideas, of a diverse set of ideas across disciplines. And so what you end up with is a greater result than you could get than if you just had these individuals in isolation. So here's an example. If you look at some of the advancements that have been made in the biological sciences recently, in genomics and proteomics and these kinds of things, it really has to do with advances in data analytics, which is mathematics and computer science. So if you didn't have people in mathematics and computer science co-located with people in biology, they wouldn't know about these kind of problems to solve. What it comes down to is creative people like to solve hard and important problems, but they have to understand what these problems are. So it's important to put them into environments of diverse creativity. When you do that, they find out problems they never had before. So now, if you keep ChemBio in an environment where you have other types of research and development going on, where you have other types of problems being addressed, you start getting a cross-pollination that is a very powerful influence to innovation.
Okay. Mr. Curry, along that line, the committee just passed the legislation authorizing the consolidation. I understand DHS has begun a review of the consolidation proposal. Can you give us an overview of your preliminary findings?
Well, sir, we're actually doing that work for Mr. Thompson and you. So we're right in the middle of that review, so we don't have any final results of that yet. However, we've been watching current events. For instance, I just took a look at the budget request that came out for the new office, and it looks like I had the same questions about were there going to be any changes in these programs in the new office, and it looks like there's not. They were just simply merged together. But quite frankly, there's not a lot of detailed plans right now about the specifics of the reorganization, and part of that DHS has told us is because they are waiting on the legislation to be final and passed. It's still got to go through the Senate. So they're sort of on hold, according to them right now, until they get legislation to move forward on that.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, I'll yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just have one final question, Dr. Brothers, about FEMA co-chairing the biological threat IPT. FEMA's a response organization. I didn't think they were much involved in R&D and technology per se. I mean, they obviously need to respond to crisis. But so can you just talk a little about what their role is and kind of how they ended up there?
I can. I appreciate the question, actually. So one of the things I firmly believe in is what's called user-producer innovation. And what that is, when you get the actual stakeholders, the people who are on the ground, whether it be FEMA or Customs and Border Protection or Coast Guard, involved in the creative process. And again, research has borne this to be true. When you get the users involved in the creative process, you get a better result more efficiently and effectively.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, I want to thank all of our witnesses for your valuable testimony today and members for their questions. Members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for the witnesses. We'll ask you to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to the committee rule 7E, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
Thank you.